I remember Bill and I were in Lake Arrowhead having lunch at the time when he had the #1 best-selling novel in the country. And he couldn't believe it, and I couldn't believe it. I said, Bill, do you understand? You have the #1 best-selling novel in the country, maybe in the world. Wow. You know, it really was great, and we knew each other so well that we could be totally honest how impressive that was without standing on protocol. By the way, that was the
You could see what you were supposed to see. And I knew not a lot about the picture because I visited preaching, and that's where I first met Bill.
This girl's head went fully around, you know, just the whole idea of the devil. I mean, we had, when it first came out, those special effects had not been seen before on that level.
Pertaining to the original Exorcist, it was absolutely a game changer as far as special makeup effects. I mean, you know, Dick Smith is what is he's basically considered our godfather of makeup effects, and the stuff that was done was absolutely phenomenal, and it still holds up today.
What was called special makeup effects really didn't exist or wasn't brought into the limelight until that film. And when you looked at the pages of Famous Monsters and you saw what this person was doing to this young girl and making her look like an absolute monster and a realistic monster was really frightening. You know, a lot of us were too young to see it at the theaters at that time. But we saw those pictures and we saw the artistry behind it. We were just enthralled, amazed.
I did see the film and it was really scary. That's the way I describe it.
Ellen Burstyn was in the first, and she was absolutely brilliant. I mean, you couldn't ask for a more honest or true actor.
The first time I saw The Exorcist, I was, the original Exorcist, I was already an adult, or a young man. I wasn't allowed to see it as a kid because I guess my mother wanted to protect me somehow, you know. It had gotten this real outrageous reputation. So I think in that interim time, the bar for shock had been moved, but for me it was more of like the suspense of it, and it was very gritty, and the confines of all the stuff in the bedroom is what affected me, and of course, you know, the makeup.
It's scary as hell. Still is.
I read the book, and I was Catholic, and I read the book when I was a kid, and we were told we were going to hell. I remember finishing the book on an afternoon after school and then hiding it under the sofa cushion so that my family wouldn't know that I had read it. Oh, God. And so A, it was terrifying because the whole world was terrified by it. B, I thought that was the end of my life. I thought I'd really done a mortal sin. And I remember reading the book better than I remember seeing the movie, which eventually I did see. I wasn't allowed to see it. I was too young to see it at the time, and my mom didn't know I'd read the book.
And Friedkin, I think was the director, was an absolute, you know, genius, so to speak. He knew what he wanted, and he got what he wanted. And the film as a result, and Blair was superb as a child.
I remember I was working on Godfather 2, and out of the Gulf and Western building to begin with, getting it set up. And Exorcist 1 was playing downstairs. And so it was evening, and it was raining, and the film had opened just a couple of days earlier, and the line was out the theater, around the block, and all the way up Central Park West for a block and a half. And I'm walking by, and there's this guy out there counting the house in the rain. And it was Billy Friedkin. I said, "Hey, Billy, what are you doing here?" Because I knew him. He says, "I'm counting the house." He says, "Those guys are robbing me blind."
Well, of course I was familiar with the original Exorcist. I mean, I was a little too young for its original release, but, I had certainly seen it and, was just as scared as everybody.
I knew nothing except that The Exorcist was a really, really scary movie. But I refused to watch it. I mean, all I'd heard how scary it was, I wasn't about to watch it. And it's funny because I would say that it's only been in the past 3 years that I finally watched it, because Bill has been giving me a hard time about it and doesn't understand why I never watched it. So I did, but it took me till my late 40s to have the guts to do it.
The original Exorcist was groundbreaking. I mean, everyone knows this, and it was more, I mean, it was one of the first biggest, not just blockbuster, it was an actual phenomenon.
Exorcist 2, not so much.
And luckily I hadn't seen The Heretic.
I've only seen it once or twice, and I was not really a big fan. It just didn't seem like an Exorcist movie, although I did like Father Merrin's backstory. When we see a younger Father Merrin, I could have seen a whole movie about that.
The Exorcist 2 was unfortunate for anyone who saw it. I can't imagine what it was like to work on it. And I don't talk ill of film. It was very artistic, and it's just shocking to see how artsy they went with it. It wasn't the same, it should have been something entirely different. It shouldn't have had the Exorcist name on it whatsoever, and maybe it would have been more popular, I don't know. It was shocking to see that compared to the original Exorcist.
It was the biggest piece of shit probably ever made. And and they had a great cast, and everybody was terrible, and the movie was ridiculous and boring. And I just cannot understand why they did that. I mean, why would they think to have James Earl Jones riding a big bug would be scary?
Who knows what was going on? There are always other factors that are in play that are, above my pay grade.
Performances were absolutely amazing. Again, I thought Brad Dourif was a standout.
Exorcist 3, I was pleasantly surprised at how creepy it was. There's some of those moments where, in the hallway where you see that's a big one for me.
I would have liked to have seen a movie that was more reminiscent of the first Exorcist film, but it was a different movie. And today there's a huge fan base for this film, and there are some really incredibly creepy moments in the movie. I mean, the paring shears in the hallway, the granny crawling on the ceiling over George C. Scott as he's completely oblivious to it. A granny crawling on the ceiling above George C. Scott, not paying attention. Great moment. There's some great moments in the movie, and I own it. And I think it would almost be a stronger film if it didn't have the connection it had to such an amazing, iconic film as Exorcist.
Well, I saw it when it came out, but I haven't seen it since then. So what carries along with me are my experiences on the stage with the different players and what have you. And the film, okay. They had a problem, no question about it. So it was probably well advised to do what they did, have an additional unit, but we could have used more prep time.
Very often, whether you're right or not, the studio will, do themselves a disservice by adopting the attitude that, well, it's the filmmaker's fault, so we're not going to put any money behind this, and we're not going to go out as hard as we could have or we should have, because we don't believe in it. How many films have there been?
The reaction from the audience or whoever's sitting next to you watching it, or that's the fun of going down memory lane with these films. You can dissect it shot by shot.
I'm pleased that it's aged so well, and people love the movie, and I can say I had a small part in working on it.
I get the same reaction from people. It's like, oh, that was the creepy one. That one was good. So it's always nice to be a part of it.
We won. Now free me.